This week on the Walk On podcast. And I just love that about musicians who are doing what they love and they light up. Would you mind talking a little bit about your experience
Absolutely.
being that authentic self?
That is actually the heart of Star Forest. Star Forest is about a band trying to make it. It requires collaboration. It requires taking risks. It requires making mistakes. And what a great way for kids to understand how to build something, how to understand that, mistakes pave the way and it's not going to be easy. And that's their journey, right? And so they're learning about themselves, about how to work together as a team. On their journey right now, they haven't found success. It's parallel. We call it self-healing storytelling in Star Forest, that a lot of the stuff we're dealing with as adults, even in building it, we're weaving that narrative into our characters and stories.
Hello and welcome to the Walk On podcast. We are in season 4, which is super exciting. The guests continue to be really interesting, really creative people. And our guest today is exemplary in that space. For those of you that are regulars or coming back, welcome. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And if you're new, Walk On, this podcast started as a way to really hear how others were finding passion in their life, turning that into leadership and purpose, whether you're at the start of your career, middle of your career, or like me, maybe on the back half or back third of your career. I wanted to figure out what was next for me as well. And so this has been super inspiring. I hope it is for you. I hope you get something from it. So that's the Walk On podcast. And with that, I am thrilled to welcome this week's guest, Genevieve Ledoux. She's an Emmy award-winning founder of Star Forest, which we're going to talk about. It's a multimedia adventure for children and families. She's got a super expansive background, from classical training in music to rock bands to producing award-winning children's content. It really does give her a unique perspective on creating something that's engaging and innovative musical experiences that resonate across generations. I can't wait to dig into that. And so Genevieve, welcome, and tell us a little bit more about your background.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Just the fact that what your podcast is about, leading with purpose, is so important to me. And I think whenever I tell my story, I talk about how music was always a big part of my life. I had family members that were musicians. My uncle was a jazz trumpet player who played with the likes of Stan Kenton and Miles Davis, and music was always in our house. One of the best things about growing up was my dad had this huge record collection, and every night before bed, he'd put on a record that we would listen to. So music was all around me. So music is a core of who I am. Beyond that, I went to art school, wanted to be a fashion designer, and I realized quickly it wasn't for me. As we all find out when we get to college, I don't know if this is my path. My father asked me, do you want to come work for me and kind of, be an intern kind of situation, and ended up staying there for 13 years. And what was so great about that experience was, of course, spending time with your parent as a more of a colleague than a parent. And he was such an amazing entrepreneur. So I learned about the business side of things from him, how to build a business, how to network, how to, make clients happy, and all the things. And so that was great for understanding how to build a business. And he was also creative as well. He was an architect. And then my sister was the nanny of the vice president of Warner Brothers, one of the vice presidents over there. And I had always been creating shows, ideas all the time, kind of, in my own world, creating these TV shows. And I basically wore her down to let me pitch to her boss.
That's awesome. Well done.
Yeah, it was a hard pass at first. She was like, no, you were not talking to her. Her name was Linda Steiner. She's a legend in the kids media business. And I went in and pitched to her some of my ideas. And she said, I love this. And she gave me a lot of feedback. And she said, unfortunately, we have some shows similar, so we can't, take these on. But do you want to come work for me? And at the time, I was vice president of the firm, my dad's firm. I had a mortgage, I was adulting. And I knew I would have to come in as someone, real low on the totem pole, and be getting coffees and doing all that stuff. And I took the leap, and leap is my word. I have it tattooed on my wrist here, a leap, because I've learned that when I take the leap, I always grow wings on the way down. And I actually had to sell my house, and there was some real sacrifices there. and I didn't know what I was doing. Luckily, she was a mentor, and I
Mhm.
learned quite a bit from her. And mentors have played significant roles in my life along the way. And without them, I know I wouldn't be here. And now in my own business, being a mentor is really important to me to other people. Did that answer the question?
I love it. That's amazing. And there are so many things there that I want to unpack. First of all, I grew up in a house that wasn't musical, but loved music. So my brother and I were the entertainment. We would be singing harmony to
Oh, I love
doo-wop bands in the back of the car, or the famous Mills Brothers. We would be singing standing on a corner at a high school presentation. And I dabbled in trumpet. So when you said that, that really resonated. And obviously Miles Davis is a gold standard of creativity. So I loved that. But I really want to dig in on something you said that is so, for me, profound. I often talk to entrepreneurs, or I've said on this podcast, and my brother, as an example, he was our first podcast guest. He left a career in pharmaceutical sales, had done it his entire life, and he's a real estate agent. And he'd always been super risk averse. And so I always talk about sort of like grabbing yourself and jumping into the river. And yours is clearly more artful and articulate, but you said leaping and growing wings on the way down. That is so powerful. Would you mind sharing a little bit more on that perspective? I find that super interesting.
I think when there's passion there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Passion is something that you can't force. And there's something that I've noticed when people talk about something and they light up, they don't even realize that they're passionate about it. Maybe like you see somebody who's unhappy in their career, and then you'll mention something and their whole body changes, their
Yeah.
whole energy changes. When you have that about something, I can get real spiritual, but like, the
Yeah.
universe, God, however you want to position it, will give you synchronicities, right? Like these things, these little taps on the shoulder. And I really firmly believe this, where it will tell you, keep going, and
Yeah. You're on the right track. Yeah.
you're on the right track. And that's the wings being built, right? It's like,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden it's like, no, 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 keep, there's a wing forming here,
Mm,
and
yeah.
so you have to do a little bit every day
Yeah.
to get those wings to grow. They're not just going to grow on their own.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And what I love that. And what are those? So let's talk a little bit about that in regard to your career. So music was obviously a passion. So you were also classically trained. You've been in rock bands. You've produced music. Talk a little bit more about that music career for us.
I never made a dime. It was always,
Welcome to the music industry.
yeah, right. And I mean that in the sense that everything I did, it wasn't money driven. Like I was doing music
Yeah.
because I love to make music, and
Yeah.
from being in cover bands to, writing my own songs that nobody heard. But I just had to. I mean, it was just who I was. And I think that's with any person you talk to who makes it through a career of art or, entertainment,
Yeah.
or it's when you're doing it because you love it, eventually the success will come. And I'm still haven't, what, like won the Grammy or whatever, that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying it. And other people, if it's authentic and it's true and people will love it. I mean, they'll find it.
Yeah.
You'll find your people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just you don't know this about me, but for a little while in Atlanta, I had owned a record label, which means I found an artist that I loved, unsigned artist, and I wrote checks to put him on the road and produce a couple albums. And
Wow.
just watching this amazing, his name's Gary Pfaff. Our intro and outro music is actually one of his songs. And just watching him be this hardworking guy going on the road a couple hundred days a year, singing in small towns, singing in bars. I just admire that pursuit, taking that leap,
Mhm.
growing wings when the axles on the truck breaks down on the side of the road at 2 a.m. in Mississippi or whatever it is, right? As an aside, real quick, one of the things talking about that, and I want to get your perspective of being in some of those bands because I think it's really fascinating. And then I want to talk about your new project. But I remember this night he played this venue called Cat's Cradle in North Carolina, and they do the programming a little different. The headliner's first. Headliner goes on, runs a little long, and the place is like emptying. And my guy's up next, and I'm like tackling people at the door, going, "I'll buy you drinks. Stay here. We'll buy a round of drinks." And there were like 3 people, and I was like, "You know what, Gary? Like, what are we doing here? Like, you don't have to go on stage." And he's like, "No, Those 3 are going to become 6. And those 6 next time we come through are going to become 20. And I just love that about musicians who are what you said. They're doing what they love and they light up, and that draws people to them. And I watched people come to Gary in droves because he was that authentic self. So would you mind talking a little bit about your experience being
Absolutely.
that authentic self?
I love that you shared that story because that is actually the heart of Star Forest. This project, Star Forest, is about a band trying to make it.
Yeah.
And the reason why I love that as the central theme is when you think about being in a band or an artist, right? It requires collaboration. It requires taking risks. It requires making mistakes. It requires, 3 people in the audience. It requires all these things to make it. And what a great way for kids to understand how to build something, how to understand that, mistakes pave the way and it's not going to be easy. And especially in this world today with kids where it's about likes, that's, and dopamine
Yes.
and all these things. And so our band, our Star Forest band, that's their journey, right? And so they're learning about themselves, about how to work together as a team, that there's these creatures in our world called star slugs. And the joke is the star slugs always come to the show. So that's like your parents and your friends, right? Uh, they have
Yeah.
on their journey right now, they haven't found success. And
Yeah.
it's parallel. We call it self-healing storytelling in Star Forest, that a lot of the stuff we're dealing with as adults, even in building it in Star Forest, we're weaving
Yeah.
that narrative into our characters and stories.
So perfect segue, unintended, although I did, understand that's the premise. So serendipity, let's pivot to Star Forest. And as we tee this up for people, I want to get into it. I love that. 2 things. One, I love that narrative. One of the things I think we've done to our young people in America, and there's a great book about it called The Bulldozer Generation, right? Parents came in, took
I
all
don't,
risk.
well,
Yeah, all challenge away. And so kids, when they get 18, 20 years old and they have that first setback, where are they? And so it really resonates that this is about a band and a community coming together to try and thrive. So I love that. The other thing, and then I want to hear about this. Tell us about the project. But I shared this with you as we got on air. My son last night, I was watching some of the videos in my office in the dark, and he snuck out of his room and I had earbuds in and I didn't realize he was there. And he was just mesmerized and he could only see it, right? And then I took the earbuds off and he could hear it. And he was like, what is this? Can I watch some, right? And I promised that we're going to watch some today because he needed to go to bed. So I was really struck for those 2 reasons by this project. So that's a long-winded way of saying, tell us about Star Forest. How did you start it? What do you want to accomplish with it? Share more.
So I was a mom in the pandemic. I had 2 kids home. They looked to me as their mom, their teacher, keeping them safe, all these things. And it was a lot of pressure for parents. It was scary. And we also had businesses to run and bills to pay. And it all, for people that were home with kids, you want to entertain them too and keep them happy. And one of the things we would do to get out of the walls closing in, because we couldn't take them anywhere, right, was drive. And we would just get in the car and we'd get to the Georgia tree line and just drive through the forest and listen to music. And it was such a great way to bond and just relax and get away. And my youngest at the time was 3, so he was very young, and he was loving the baby shark and the earworm, just the stuff that was like makes you want to go
I'm
back.
sorry.
Yeah. And what was so
Yeah.
funny is his 5-year-old brother, just a couple months before, was really into the same thing. We could all listen to the same kids' music. And I was also playing, stuff I liked, Bohemian Rhapsody they loved,
Yeah.
there's some adult music. But he said out loud, he said, I don't like my little brother's music at all. And I was like, oh, he was very sure about that. And he said, and I like your and daddy's music, but it's just not for me. Where is the music just for me? And it stopped me dead in my tracks. I thought,
Yeah.
what is the music just for you? Where's that music for a 5-year-old? Because the preschool toddler stuff is so prolific. There's so much of it.
Yes.
But by 5, these kids have their own ideas. I mean, they start at 4 now. I mean, they really know, they're starting to know who they are very young. And I think they always have, but the world's changed. And I went on a mission to find this music for him. So I did a deep dive. Where's music for 5-year-old, 5 to 10, And what I was finding was so interesting. they found that all these little girls found Let It Go with Frozen, right? They went, that's for
Hmm.
me. And it went to the top of the charts because why? It was well produced. It was well done. Adina Menzel. I mean, it's beautiful music.
Yeah.
They found it because they didn't have anything just for them. This is mine, right? And it's
Yeah.
still happening with that song. And then I thought on the flip side, okay, who's making money in this space and who's successful? And it was something called Kids Bop, which is where they take
Hmm.
adult music and they kidify it, which is a billion-dollar
Yep.
brand. And I haven't found any parents or kids that are like, Kids Bop, yeah. So the fact
Yeah.
that they're making, a killing at it and told me that there's a white space there, right?
Hmm.
Um, and that was kind of what set me off to find it. When I couldn't find it, what he wanted stuff about outer space. He wanted stuff about his backyard. I mean, video games and all the stuff he was into, and I couldn't find it for him. And so I made a little record with my cousin who was a composer. I knew I didn't want to be forward facing on the stage. I'm almost 50 and I saw that wasn't going to be me up there with a guitar. And so I saw where he was hanging out, what he was gravitating towards, and obviously animation, video games. And I
Mm,
thought it has to be a gorillas for kids, essentially how I thought about it in the
love
beginning.
it.
And we put it out and we hit 1 million streams. And I knew in that moment, because I didn't watch it, I didn't promote it, I didn't market it. And I
Yeah.
thought, well, people are looking for this. And that was my why. And
Yeah.
I've been on that journey ever since.
I didn't really piece that together. And as I mentioned, before, I've got a 4-year-old, so he's enamored. He's sort of at the a young end of the music that you're creating, and it didn't resonate with me. Like we did this road trip at Christmas, and I put together a kid-friendly playlist, but I didn't want to spend 8 hours listening to Disney, or no shade Disney, but like Disney music, or I can only listen to the Spider-Man theme song so many times, or like even Spidey and Friends. Patrick Stamp. Does the soundtrack, and it's essentially like his band Light, right? And so we can both kind of
No,
vibe off it, but it wasn't his thing. And until you said it, I didn't. So I created this playlist that was like safe for him, but it was like I'd like it and challenging. So like REM, 10,000 Maniacs, Alanis Morissette, the Allman Brothers, and he just kept going boring, boring, and I was like, so it really resonates when you said this is for him, and it makes me excited to share it with him today when we do it later. So I love that. So talk a little bit more. There are some other things in the marketing materials of this content that you're really focused on. So I'd love to explore that. So one is nature deficit disorders. The music really does have this connectivity to the environment and open spaces. So talk a little bit more about nature deficit disorder, and how you weave that into the music.
so nature deficit disorders, a lot of kids don't have access to green spaces. There's certain areas even in the UK where kids can get to become an adult and have never spent time in a park. I mean, it's just city kids, and also screens on since the time they were very little. To working parents, how do you entertain them? They can't just go out in the backyard. So this generation calls it touching grass. That's kind of the joke. I got to touch grass. My son will
Mm,
say, I need to go touch grass. It's kind of a joke. They're aware of it,
yeah.
that they're not out there a lot. But the deficit disorder is causing some mental health issues, right? Some of it's linked to like lack of vitamin D, but more of it is a mindfulness, a quiet, and we're so inundated with noise, right? But the challenge
Yeah.
is, how do we make media, which is more media?
Yeah.
It's content when we're trying to say get out in nature. What I found about nature deficit disorder, if you make kids care about moss and understand
Mm,
why moss exists, they want to see it.
mm,
If you understand that in the center of our universe is the mother tree, and she kind of it's just this pathway, right? And it's synergistic, and everything connects to her, and that's how real forests are.
mm.
These pathways. So I started thinking about the neural pathways of the brain, and then the neural pathways of the forest, and I just started realizing it's all connected. So if I can connect them in, through nature, even if it's on the screen, and it starts to resonate and they start to care, they'll want to connect in the real world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And I loved in one of the songs, and I won't do the lyric justice, but it talked about something from nature sticking to their hand as they're going through this like outdoor
Oh,
space. And
right.
it just really that this isn't yucky. This is nature. This is real. This is connected to us. Um,
That's
it resonated with me.
yeah. Is that where she puts her hand and it lights up? Yeah,
Yes.
that's her, the female singer in the band. She's the guitar player, Fawn. She is connected. That's her love letter to the forest and everything. And it's amazing how many kids watch that and they're like, "Do trees light up when you touch them?" I mean, these questions, and then you can get into
Yeah.
bioluminescence, and it's all woven into the DNA. And if they ask the right questions and curiosity, if they're curious, they'll go after it,
Mhm.
right? You got to get them
Yeah.
curious. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So tactically, then I think we're hearing a lot of it, but what do you hope the impact is for this really expansive project on children?
I'm a Walt Disney in my head. I want a theme park. I mean, I'm like, I think like that. But right now,
Yeah.
um I've said yes to a lot of things, but the stuff that's stuck around and really resonated is neurodivergent kids, right? There's
Mhm.
more of them than ever, and they're not seen in the right ways in media. It's like the autistic kid, and they don't want
Yeah.
we don't put labels on our characters, but they all have these traits. I'm
Mhm.
ADHD. One of the characters is like me, and so these kids out there in the real world finding these characters relatable and saying, I see myself in this, and I haven't seen
Mhm.
myself before. That's one thing.
Yeah.
The other thing is that inspiring them to create their own universes, their own worlds, their own stories. I think that we've already gotten some feedback is, oh, I draw pictures. Can I, inspiring creativity because the band's trying to make it with their music.
Yeah.
That failing is part of it. And you can't find success without the failures. Those are stepping
Yeah.
stones. And then I think the last thing would probably be the nature connection. And we've
Yeah.
partnered now with Evertreen to where the goal is that when a kid comes into Star Forest and he plants his what we call a star seed, we're actually planting a tree in the real world. So we have purchased some land in Madagascar that's a branded forest where they can watch their tree grow and see that they're eliminating carbon emissions and all these things. And it's a tangible thing that they can actually watch on a satellite image. So that's really exciting that we're getting there. Um, and I feel like there's so much more, but those are right now
Yeah.
what's coming out.
No, it's amazing.
That live shows that's actually the light on the hill because there are no live show experiences for 5 to 10 that are
Yep.
adult centered experiences.
Yeah.
There's a ton in the preschool space, so you can go see,
Yep.
Blippi and Sesame Street and Paw Patrol, and I worked on Yo Gabba Gabba Live and all these great preschool family events. When they hit 5, they're ending up going to an adult concert, and what can happen there? It's not
Yeah.
safe, right? The content's
Yeah.
not for them. So I could not find a live show experience for those kids. It doesn't exist. So anytime I see something that doesn't exist, I get really excited because I couldn't take my 5-year-old to a concert. Uh,
Yeah.
and that was mind blowing, right? And we all want to
Yeah.
connect as a family through music, but it has to feel like it's theirs.
I love that you keep returning back to that. And that blue ocean is what excites me, right? Like there are two sides to that, right? Why hasn't this been done before? So take caution. There's maybe a reason, but it's certainly an opportunity. And so I really enjoy that. And you started to tee up my next question a little bit. But before I do that, I just want to really double tap again the failure. We've been teaching my son to ice skate. I was a college hockey player and important to me. And there were a couple times he didn't want to go on Saturdays to class because he was scared to fall. And we've gotten to a point now where I always say, what happens when we fall down? And he's like, well, we get up. And so now starting to build that sense of, well, I fell, but that's part of learning. That's part of growing your wings, earning your wings, right? It's each step. So I really thank you for that. It resonates. I love products that are doing that. So as the universe, how do you create and manage a universe for characters that spans albums, podcasts, theme parks? How do you keep that all together?
It always starts with the why and the story. And we spent 4 years just on the lore. Like, what is this? Because this Gen Alpha generation, I'm obsessed with them. I have 2 of them. They're the first generation born completely in the digital age that they're going to be, 65% of the jobs they'll have don't even exist yet. If you think about that, it's like mind blowing.
That's mind
Um,
blowing.
it is. And so they're going to be digital natives their whole life. They are going to have AI. They're going to have all these things that are just normal to them. And they're sharp. Like you said, I know my kids are smarter than me and they have so much information at the touch of it, at their fingertips. So I knew these kids want to go deep. They don't like
Mm,
surface, and they're very discerning because they have these quick attention span, right? And they constantly consume. They can discern if something's not authentic very quickly. I've said
yes.
something and my son will say, "Oh, that was debunked 5 months ago." Really? I mean, they're just, and I watch how
Yeah.
quickly they dissect it in just moments. Oh, no, that's not true. No, that's not real, you know? So I knew these kids, especially neurodivergents, like if you find a neurodivergent kid and you talk about Pokemon, he'll tell you 5 hours about Pokemon. They're like that
Yeah.
about Minecraft. They're like that about, so I knew if it was too surface and it was just a band trying to make it, there's so many layers, onion layers,
Yeah.
and it took years to build. You were talking earlier, I want to connect back to something you said about how you're
Yeah.
a musician. We look at a Chapel Roan, right? And we go, "Oh my gosh, you know, she's the biggest thing right now. She's at the Grammys and she's doing all the things." And she spent 10 years, she got dropped from her label. It was not an overnight success. It was a lot of struggle, a lot of pain, a lot of rejection, and all these things. Um, so for us, that's the story, right? Is this band has to experience all these things because
Yeah.
then when it happens, it's way sweeter. You appreciate it
Yeah.
more. There's more value to it, and you've made these connections along the way that you wouldn't have got there without.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and I always sort of laugh when somebody says the overnight sensation. Oh yeah, you missed them being in bars for 10 years playing for four
Living in
people
their
or
van and
whatever, or
yeah,
living in their van. Yeah, for sure. And
Jules
it's like, oh
lived
wow,
in,
they just showed up.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
think the musicians that make it these days is the reason people are drawn to them. It's like TikTok world now. That's where they're being discovered. Is this generation, the Gen Z and the Gen Alpha, can look at them immediately and know if they're authentic and genuine.
and I think what is your take? To me, that's creating a new richness. Like there's this artist
Yeah.
Lola Young, British artist that I've been listening to lately, and her whole thing is about she has this confidence, but also this awareness of here's how you or others are perceiving me and how these negatives, and I'm wounded by it, but I don't care because I'm confident. So I feel like it's opening up doors to voices and people that we didn't hear before. Maybe
I,
what do you
I,
think about that?
I 100% agree. I feel that. I mean, when I'm looking at certain artists and why am I connecting? Is it the music? That's part of it. But now in this, I'm
Yeah.
connected to the person and their experiences and their vulnerability and all these things.
Mhm.
And I think with Star Forest, the next phase for us, the band's going to start talking directly to the kids. So you think about children's entertainment for the last 50 years, it's passive. They sit down and they
Yeah.
watch it. What's
Yeah.
changed about this generation, why YouTube is the number one platform for kids, it's surpassed Netflix and Disney. 85% of kids are on YouTube. And part of it is they get to make the choices. Their algorithm kicks in, it knows what they want, and they can talk to it. It's a back and forth, right? The number one job now that an 8-year-old wants to be is a YouTuber. So
So my go ahead.
I was just gonna say, last thing is we knew our characters had to be as real as they could be. There's real cast behind them, and a lot of their stories were woven into these characters, real life, right? Real musicians, and they're now going to say, "Hey, John, I got your comment. Let me tell you about that." So there's this one time that we're actually we built VTuber puppets of our characters. So that's the next phase is they're going to start talking as if they were real musicians because they are.
That's amazing. And it it is astonishing when you just said the number of people who want to be YouTubers. We took our child to a pre-K sort of open house the other day, and it happened to be when the elementary school was having a jobs day where you dressed up as what you wanted to be. And there are police officers and nurses and veterinarians, and there were multiple kids with iPads or laptops and headsets, and they had to have a little sign of what they were. And they said, I want to be a YouTuber.
Well,
I didn't know that was a thing. I mean, I know,
it's
so
crazy.
I think it's amazing that you know that audience so well.
Yeah, I mean, besides that they live in me, I've asked parents a lot of questions. The I think what's fascinating is that there's three types of ways you reach kids, right? There's aspirational, so it's the superheroes and that, like, oh wow, and then there's like that's me. I see me. It's a kid. They're like just like me. And then there's the like Mr. Rogers, like the more the parent,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what's happening with YouTube is it's like all three. I want to be
Mm,
that. You're just like me. and you're like older and cool, like in kind of like
Yeah.
those stuff. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. It's like all, I think that's why they like it so much, is they see all of these
Yeah.
things in these characters. They're people.
Amazing. So I want to be really respectful of your time. I don't want to leave without covering this. You've been quoted as saying Star Force inspires a new generation of thinkers, dreamers, and doers. I'd love to know who inspired you growing up and who's inspiring you now.
So I'm glad you asked that, because for me, it always comes back to my parents. And I was really lucky to have parents that didn't clip my wings and let me paint on my wall and, write songs on my Casio keyboard when everybody wanted to go to sleep. Um, but I'm going to share a story about my dad. And my dad was from a family of 9, and there was 6 of the 9 kids that went swimming at a public pool in the San Fernando Valley, and they all got polio, the largest family ever infected, like in one family in the United States. So you can imagine, as like a parent having 6 kids in the hospital. My father was 10 at the time, and he was put into an iron lung, and he was told he would probably never get out. He was a really athletic kid, a really creative kid, and he was told, you'll be trapped in this machine for the rest of your life. You can imagine. He was heartbroken, and at this point he had 1/3 lung capacity. He'd lost use of his left arm, his right leg, and he was depressed and sad, and of course all these things, and his parents didn't know how to reach him. And so his father had brought him for his birthday a book, The Gnome King of Oz. And so he's in this contraption, and he's got the book, and he's got use of one hand, and he's turning the pages. As he's reading, he realizes he went to Oz. He left this uncomfortable body,
Mm.
and he went somewhere. He was transported, and he felt the power in that. And so here he is in a room in a hospital with 100 other kids in iron lungs in this ward. And at 7 p.m., all the nurses and the doctors went home, and they were left alone by themselves in these machines. And he thought, maybe I should read it out loud. And he realized that all the iron lungs started to sink and slow down, and that they were listening. So he continued to read this story, and then he thought, imposter syndrome, maybe they're not listening. And he stopped, and a little boy said, please don't stop. So my dad then continued to read all these Oz books to these kids in the iron lung. And my dad eventually did get out 2 years later when he was 12. And he went on and was an artist and did all these things. And he had a hard time at first, acclimating to high school and all these things with disabilities back then in
Yeah.
the 70s. But his sense of humor got him through, I'll say that. But his art teacher paid for him to go after he graduated to Europe. And he was standing at a fountain, and he saw a man who looked very similar, with similar ailments. And he said, by any chance, did you have polio? And he said, I did. I had it as a kid. And they started talking, and they realized they were both in iron lungs in the same hospital at the same time.
Oh my gosh.
And my dad said, sorry, I'm going to get a little emotional. It's hard not to. He said, what do you do for a living? And he said, oh, I'm a children's book author. And my dad said, oh, what made you decide to do that? And he said, a little boy read me stories when I was in the iron lung. My dad told me that a week before he passed away. I never knew that story. Polio for my dad was almost like a Vietnam type of thing, where he just didn't
Yeah.
talk about it. I knew in that moment, I not only wanted to tell stories, I needed to, and it was a responsibility. And that was my purpose, became clear.
I don't really know how to respond to that story. It is so, and I'm getting emotional thinking of children alone and the voice and power of creativity,
Mhm.
transporting us, taking them out of that space. That's truly extraordinary. That's truly extraordinary.
We can tell real life stories and deal with real life problems in imaginary places. And for us, Star
Mm,
Forest actually isn't an imaginary realm. Star Forest is the flow state. So Star Forest for us
mm,
is where you go when you're at your highest creative self, when you lose yourself in something, and that's when you have purpose and you're driven by a calling.
yeah.
So the first song is "Can You Hear Me?" is the mother tree calling out. If we listen to the life is happening for us, not to us. And if
Mm.
we listen, there's something calling us. When you hear that call, please listen.
I can't think of a more perfect and poetic place to end it. I could do this all day long. Genevieve, thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for sharing Star Forest. Where can people find Star Forest, by the way?
So we have a website, starforest.rocks. We are on YouTube, Star Forest. You can search. We're pretty much on all the music streaming platforms, wherever you discover music. And we're also on the social channels, but we're just excited to connect with kids and families.
Just so powerful. That is so extraordinary. And when you get the live show, we will be the first to buy tickets. We will be there. Can't wait. Genevieve, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. And get me your info so I can send your son some star slugs.
Oh my God, amazing. And so thank you. This is the Walk On Podcast, people leading with passion and purpose, providing a roadmap for your personal journey. Hear their stories, find your passion, walk on. Thanks again, Genevieve.
Thank you so much.
I was hanging